The film begins with Charles receiving a shipment of Lamborghini cars at the port. After that, he goes to his company, which is basically a simple warehouse, where his girlfriend Susanna and Lenny, the sales manager, work. These three are the only employees in the company. We see Charles talking on the phone with the bank manager from whom he took a loan, trying to convince him to postpone the repayment date. At the same time, Lenny is speaking with the buyer who is supposed to take the cars and is extremely angry because they still haven't arrived, demanding that Lenny return the deposit he paid. When Lenny tells Charles about it, Charles says, "Tell him I'll deduct $5,000 from the price of each car if he waits 2 more days, because the cars can't be released from the port right now due to some procedures." Lenny calls the buyer and manages to convince him with Charles's offer. Charles then takes Susanna with him to spend the weekend by the sea. During that time, Lenny calls Charles and tells him that the family lawyer contacted him and informed him of his father's death, and that the funeral will be tomorrow at 9 in the morning in the cemetery near the family home. At that moment, Charles doesn't seem affected by the news and asks Lenny if anyone else called him. Lenny says no, so Charles ends the call. Susanna tries to comfort him, but he tells her that his father's death or life makes no difference to him because he cut ties with him long ago. She asks him if he will go to the funeral, and he says yes, so she tells him she will go with him. The next day, Charles attends the funeral. After the ceremony ends, the family lawyer tells him he will meet him in his office in 2 hours. Charles returns to the car and tells Susanna, who was waiting for him, that they will go to the lawyer after 2 hours. He takes her and they go to the family home, where he opens the garage and shows her his father's Buick, telling her that his father never allowed him to drive this car, and that he only drove it once in his life. When they enter the house, he tells her that his father had no other children, yet he still hated him. He tells her that his mother died 3 years after he was born, and when he was young and scared, his imaginary friend, Rain Man, used to sing and play with him, but then disappeared. He also tells her that his father was so harsh with him that he loved his car more than he loved him. When Charles turned 16 and graduated high school with high honors, he took the car out with his friends to celebrate. When his father did not find the car in the garage, he reported it stolen, and when the police caught Charles and his friends, they contacted the parents. The parents of his friends came and took their children, while his father left him locked in the station for 2 nights. After that, Charles left home and never returned, nor did he answer his father's calls. 2 hours later, Charles goes to the lawyer, and is shocked to learn that his father left a will saying that he knew he was harsh with Charles, and that this was the reason Charles refused to answer his calls. In the will, he tells him, "I love you," and informs him that he will inherit the Buick, while the house and all his assets, worth $3 million, will be placed in a trust fund under the name of another person whom Charles does not need to know. Charles becomes furious and asks who this person is, but the lawyer refuses to tell him. The next day, Charles takes Susanna and goes to the bank, where he manages to learn from the employee in charge of the safety deposit boxes that his father's fortune is in a trust fund under the name of Dr. Brunner, the director of Walbrook Care Center. They go to the center, and Charles meets Dr. Brunner and tries to find out who the beneficiary of the trust fund is, but the doctor refuses to tell him. Charles asks him to give him the money from the fund, but the doctor says he cannot. When Charles leaves the care center, he is surprised to find a man with autism sitting next to Susanna in the car. Charles kicks him out of the car, and the man steps outside, telling him that he is a skilled driver and that the car seats used to be brown before being replaced. He also tells him the car's type and specifications. Charles is shocked because everything he said is true. The man then says that his father used to let him drive the car slowly through narrow driveways. Charles asks, "What is your father's name?" He answers, "Sanford Babbitt." Charles is stunned because he realizes this autistic man is his brother. Dr. Brunner confirms it and tells him that Raymond is his older brother, and that his father placed Raymond in the care center when Raymond was 3 years old. The doctor tells him that Raymond is autistic but intelligent, and that he struggles to communicate with the outside world. He cannot express himself or his emotions well, cannot protect himself, and cannot deal with danger. Therefore, he must live in a calm and familiar environment surrounded by doctors and nurses who can handle his condition. He also has strict routines in eating, drinking, dressing, and sleeping, and any change in his routine confuses and scares him. Charles asks whether Raymond knows how much he inherited. The doctor replies no, because he doesn't understand the concept of money and doesn't know how to use it. His father left him the money to ensure he lives safely in the center for the rest of his life. Charles then goes to Raymond's room. When Raymond sees his brother touching his belongings, he becomes anxious, and the nurse tells Charles that Raymond does not like anyone touching his things. After a while, Charles manages to convince his brother to leave the center with him. He takes him out, and Susanna accompanies them to a hotel, where Charles books a suite with 2 rooms connected by a door. As soon as Raymond enters his room, he tells Charles that he wants his bed to be next to the window as he is used to, and that the television must be in front of the bed so he can watch his favorite show. He also requests a specific type of food, and Charles orders it for him. Susanna rearranges the room, but Raymond remains anxious because he doesn't have books to read, so Charles gives him the phone book and tells him to read it until morning. That night, Susanna gets angry at Charles because he kidnapped his brother to blackmail the doctor responsible for the trust fund. She leaves him and walks out. In the morning, Charles takes Raymond to a restaurant for breakfast. When Raymond sees the waitress's name on her uniform, he tells her phone number and address. She is shocked and asks how he knew her information. Raymond tells his brother that last night he memorized all the names in the phone book from A to C. Charles is amazed and asks him not to move from his place. He goes to call the doctor and tells him he wants a check for half the inheritance in exchange for returning Raymond. The doctor says he cannot, and Charles replies, "Think about it, I'll call you later." Meanwhile, the waitress drops a box of toothpicks, and Raymond is able to count them just by looking at them. Charles thinks it is just a coincidence. Then he takes Raymond to the airport to fly back to Los Angeles. The moment Raymond sees the airplane, he panics and screams, telling his brother that flying is dangerous. Charles tries to convince him that the plane trip will take 3 hours, but driving will take 3 days. But Raymond does not believe his brother and keeps screaming, so Charles is forced to take him and leave the airport. They begin their journey to Los Angeles by car. That same night, they come across an accident on the highway, and Raymond becomes terrified and gets out of the car. Charles gets out after him and tries to convince him to return to the car, but he refuses and tells him that the highway is dangerous. Charles says, "Okay, I'll drive behind you slowly until we get off the highway." Raymond agrees. Charles drives slowly behind him, and once they leave the highway, Raymond gets back into the car and tells him that he must sleep at 11 o'clock. Charles says, "I'll drive at night so we can arrive faster because I need to get back to work as soon as possible," but Raymond keeps repeating himself, so Charles is forced to stop and spend the night in a countryside house along the road. The next day it starts raining, and Raymond refuses to get in the car because driving in the rain is dangerous. Charles has no choice but to stay in the country house with his brother. Meanwhile, he calls Lenny, who tells him that if he doesn't pay the loan within 2 days, they will lose everything. At the same time, Raymond tells his brother that it is lunchtime and specifies exactly what he wants to eat, so Charles goes out in the rain to get him the food he asked for. After a while, Charles calls the lawyer and asks him to schedule a court session so he can become his brother's legal guardian and gain control of the $3 million. The next day they continue their trip to Los Angeles, and Raymond tells his brother that their father used to allow him to drive the car slowly in narrow driveways, which surprises Charles because his father never allowed him to drive the car at all. Then Raymond insists on going back to buy new socks from a store next to the care center where their father used to buy his clothes. He keeps repeating this until Charles gets angry and tells him that they will go to a psychiatrist in the next city to examine his condition because he is losing his patience. When they arrive at the doctor's office, the doctor tells Charles that his brother is not autistic, because autistic people cannot communicate or talk the way Raymond does. He proves it by asking Raymond to solve very complex math problems, which Raymond solves easily. Charles is shocked and says, "My brother is a genius, he should work at NASA." Strangely, when the doctor asks him to solve a simple problem, he cannot. The doctor explains that Raymond is a special case and must return to the care center because only they know how to handle him properly. After that, Charles calls Lenny from a phone booth on the road, and Raymond becomes anxious and tells him that his favorite TV show will start in 5 minutes and he must watch it as he always does. Charles finds no solution except to go to a house nearby and explain Raymond's condition to the woman living there. She allows them to come in and lets Raymond watch his show. Meanwhile, Charles calls Lenny, who tells him that they lost the cars and the loan, and that the buyer wants his deposit back. This means Charles now owes $80,000, and if he doesn't pay, he will go to jail. That night, they go to a motel along the road, where Charles hears his brother saying, I'm like Rain Man. Charles asks him, where did you hear that name? Are you Rain Man? Raymond answers, yes, and shows him a picture of himself as a child with their father. Charles asks him, did you live with us at home? Raymond replies, yes. Charles asks, when did you leave the house? Raymond says, January 21st, 1965. Charles asks him when their mother died, and he answers, January 5th, 1965. Then Raymond tells him that on the day he left the house, Charles waved at him from the window and said, goodbye, Rain Man. Charles is shocked and realizes that Raymond is the one who used to sing to him when he was little. He asks him, were you the one who sang to me? Raymond says, yes, and starts singing. Charles sings along with him. At that moment, Charles turns on the bathtub water to prepare it for his brother, but Raymond panics and screams that the hot water will burn the baby. Charles turns the water off and says, this is why Dad sent you to the care center. You tried to protect me when I was a baby and he was afraid you would hurt me, so he sent you away. Raymond says, yes. Charles becomes emotional and feels guilty. When Raymond tells him that at 11 o'clock the lights must be turned off so he can sleep, Charles takes off his shoes, helps him into bed, and covers him. After that, he calls Susanna, begs her to forgive him, and she tells him she already has. Then he buys his brother a small battery-powered TV so he can watch the shows he likes, and afterward he takes him to Las Vegas. There, Charles pawns his Rolex, buys Raymond a new suit and buys himself one identical to it. He takes advantage of Raymond's intelligence, and they play blackjack. Raymond tells him the winning numbers, and they win $85,000. Charles is thrilled because he will now be able to pay his debts. That same night, Susanna arrives, and they spend the night together in a luxury suite. Raymond tells his brother he wants to learn how to dance, so Charles teaches him himself. After that, they return to Los Angeles. Charles takes Susanna home and then takes his brother to his own house. That night, Charles sleeps and leaves Raymond alone. Raymond tries to use the food heater but doesn't know how, and the device catches fire. The alarm goes off, and Raymond becomes terrified. Charles wakes up, breaks the alarm, and tries to calm him down. The next day, Charles takes his brother to the lawyer, where Dr. Brunner is present as well. The lawyer asks Raymond many questions, and Raymond becomes anxious, but he says, I love my brother, and I want to stay with him. When the lawyer asks him if he wants to return to the center, Raymond says, yes, I want to live in the center and I want to live with Charles. At that moment, Charles realizes that the questions are overwhelming his brother. When the lawyer and doctor leave the room, Charles approaches Raymond and asks, do the questions bother you? Raymond says, yes. Charles replies, no one will ask you anything anymore. Raymond then rests his head on his brother's shoulder and says, Charles is Raymond's main man. In the end, Charles hands his brother over to the doctor, and they go to the train station so Raymond can return to the care center. Before Raymond gets on the train, Charles says, I'm your brother, and I love you, and I'll visit you always at the center. Raymond replies, Charles. Raymond's main man. Then he gets on the train, which departs, and the film ends.